Well, g'day everyone. It's the Two Ordinary Cops, and we're back again. And we've got our guest back, Cath. So it's great to have you back. But I'll pass on to Damo. He's just going to give a recap of the last couple of episodes, and then we'll move into the third one. How
Yeah,
you got, mate?
good, mate. Good. Yeah, no, really good. We've got Cath back. We're getting some good feedback too. Obviously, out of the tragedy, but it's a story that a lot of people wouldn't have heard. That the humanity of what goes on around these kind of incidents. So, how are you, Cath?
I'm good, thanks, boys. I'm really good.
Well, you would be. You're not in Australia, are you?
I'm not. No, I'm in freezing cold USA at the moment. Currently in Buffalo, so it's much earlier in the morning here, a bit after 5 a.m. and
Yeah.
on our way to Toronto later today. So yeah, I'm great. I'm not in the stinking hot in Australia.
Yeah.
Very good.
And it shows your dedication to the show coming on at 5 a.m.
Doesn't it? Yeah, it does. It does. It really does.
I think we've set a precedent there. That's the most commitment we've ever seen. I don't think
Yeah.
anyone's ever
rightio.
come on at 5 a.m. So that's good. No,
Yeah.
well done. Yeah, so obviously we're going to move forward into part 3 of this series. And in the previous 2 episodes, obviously we covered off the incident itself, went through just basically the operational incident and what occurred and the immediate aftermath, kind of still operational, and then that immediate after the things that happen straight away after a situation like this. We then moved forward and spoke about the days and months and weeks following, so the funeral and what was going on in between that time, and how I think the crux of it was society is with you for a while, but then moves on, and operational policing obviously has to continue. But you're still going through pretty acute trauma, so it's a hell of a thing to go through and to balance out. And then obviously today, with anything involved with sudden death, and especially around police contact and all the rest of it, there's always going to be a coronial inquest. And we've obviously spoken to Zach Roth, and we've gone right through that coronial inquest. Well, the death of Brett and Ricky Madison in that situation was no different. There was a coronial inquest that occurred, and also just the fallout, the long-term fallout that comes from that. So, Cath, I think the best thing to do is hand over to you and just go from there and let us know sort of what happened those months and even years down the track.
Years. Yeah. So it was the process that you're talking about. Yeah, months, and definitely years until the findings, which were only a couple of years ago now. But you're right, coronials. By the very nature, they're interesting, aren't they? I've learnt so much. Really have, over the last sort of 8 years, and coronials, by its very nature, they're emotive, aren't they? Yes, it's a mechanism for improvement. It's necessary, but it's emotive because we've always got victims. As you said, there's always a deceased person, usually. You've got families of victims. You've got opposing views and beliefs. People want answers. Family want answers. And, of course, then the other side, police, they want to justify what they've done as well, don't they? And I guess for me, what I realised is there's a balance. There's a difference between some just want their narrative accepted, but others, just want transparency. So I think that's always something with coronials. It's kind of at loggerheads, and then of course you have the coroner, who's the objective voice in everything, and that's why all the time. And then obviously people are on, families on TV afterwards, and are not happy with something because there's always the two sides, and that's why it's so emotive, I reckon. Yeah. So, of course, after the death, an investigation was kicked off by ESC into both Brett and Madison's deaths. But it didn't take long before I began hearing conflicting stories just around who knew what, compared to then what I was being told officially and what I was being told unofficially. So just let me fast forward to the coronial, which was in April 2021. My evidence that I gave was of cultural issues within pockets of the TCS. So the TCS was an office of, 20 or so, 18, and then there was a smaller pocket that was the office particularly looking for Ricky. So my evidence was just around cultural issues within certain pockets that was happening in the TCS prior to the incident. Officers doing work just in their own time, which I think is always dangerous, outside of work time, certain duties being done, siloing of information. Some officers in TCS had the view there was an A and a B team type situation going on. Anyway, so all this was contained in my truthful evidence of what I knew to be the case. And of course, that was not well received. And in actual fact, I copped some brutal behaviours over it, which you could imagine in a policing organisation, that was always going to be the case. All of the conflicting stories I was hearing after the incident, just against the backdrop of what I knew the culture was like. So I guess that's what heightened a lot of us. It heightened us to go, well, we want to know the truth. We just want a bit of transparency here. So Brady and I did know that Madison was wanted. We did know he was already subject of cert action, meaning that he was considered too high a risk for regular police, as you boys would know, that cert had been engaged to find him and arrest him. And we knew he was to be in possession of what was described in intel reports as a pirate gun. Pretty soon, I guess, we realised there were gaps in stories. There were some really, really big coincidences that Susie and I, and quite rightly so, we wanted to know the answers to. So we were told, not having anything to do with ESC beforehand, it was all new. I was told, and I know Susie was as well, that we were allowed to ask the questions because we were victims. So ESC told us, you're allowed to ask questions. Pretty soon it became apparent to me that the questions needed to be asked, but as I soon quickly discovered, being allowed to ask questions was one thing, and actually when I did ask the questions, that's a completely different story. So as I said, it appeared some new information that others did not. Definitely Brady and I did not. And if we did know this other information, our decision making that day to follow Ricky Madison down Waller's Road, would have been very, very different. So what I mean by that is a few weeks prior to the incident, there'd been a number of reports made to police from in that area of automatic gunfire coming from Waller's Road. And automatic gunfire is very unusual. You hear shots fired, jobs all the time, but automatic gunfire is quite unusual. So for us, the obvious question was, who knew that? Why didn't we have that intel? And let me get it straight, it wasn't to blame anyone. It was just to go, what did we miss? What did happen here? But of course, that's when things did start to turn bad, I suppose. So we were learning that other officers within the TCS knew of this information or had even been involved in submitting intel reports on certain information that the rest of us didn't know. For example, so a few police in our office knew of gunfire on Waller's Road. And when I, for example, when I asked about this straight up, I was told, no, we didn't know. So I'm being told, hearing different stories. And at that time I was even scolded for speaking with ethical standards, which was just sickening to me, because all I wanted was a safe place to be. I just wanted peace. I was told I could ask these questions, and here I am getting a blast for speaking to ethical standards. It was like a bit of a, as it was unfolding to me, it was like a bit of a nightmare or a movie that you see, So we learnt that these are just part of the coincidences, that 10 days before the shooting, an officer, just in their own time, was just doing bushwalking on Waller's Road because there was a national park near there. Yes, and that was a coincidence. But then during this bushwalk, this off-duty officer came across a male, like it's a remote bit of road, of course, just came across a male driving on Waller's Road. He lived on Waller's Road, it turns out, and it turns out he was the man living with Ricky Madison at the time. And of course, this is all just a coincidence, yep. And then we find out that the night before this walk, an officer was doing 7 hours of work in his own time, doing Q prime checks down the range, checks on Ricky and his associates. So all these things added up, and we were just, something, we're not being told everything, we just need to know. And then, so it turns out, that Ricky and this other man that this person that came across were living together. There was no connection on Q prime with them. Only connection was that they were both on the warnings and cautions flags, were both listed as being associated with life and death. Motorcycle gang. And I guess I struggled in particularly with that, because to me it was like, if you come across someone in your sporting organisation, someone knows someone, it's not uncommon to say, oh, do you know so-and-so? So to me it was like, well, I would call these missed opportunities at the very least, I suppose. Nonetheless, so all of these different questions that we rightly so, whether they were coincidences or not, we had the right to ask the questions. And what happened to both Susie and I, because of that, really is not acceptable. So, we learned other things, like there was a previous intel report put in on Ricky Madison about having that exact same weapon. And we were told that because his name was spelt with 2 T's instead of 2 D's, it didn't get registered properly, even though the intel report was fixed properly. I don't know. So there was all these things. We're like scratching our heads, not understanding why it's not making more sense. So it was all quite confusing. But what I'm getting at is because of, these coincidences, and I think anyone, even objectively, would think, well, you want to know more about this. We were threatened. I was threatened with the 466, which is a complaint, that a complaint would be made. Retaliation, just about things that I was supposed to be saying to other people, that I was causing trouble. Then, all of a sudden, Susie and I are the enemy. And at no stage did I want to have an issue with anything or anyone. I was sad. I was mourning the loss of Brett. I had survivor's guilt. I was coming to terms with my own mortality, but at no stage did I misunderstand what I was being told. And just so many things. I think sometimes not knowing the truth of something is worse than knowing, because it messes with your thought system. And it got to the point where even at one stage they took my gun from me. I read notes later that they, inverted commas, had made that my mental health was in disarray, basically that I was unravelling, things like I was not speaking to my husband, so things that either weren't true or just taken out of context. And that was a really devastating time, and it was an example of that being used against you. Oh, the female with mental health problems, that use that card. And I took 6 weeks off work, which was great, and that was a good idea, and returned to the TCS office. And to be honest, things weren't any better. I recall the very first day, I again had copped a hard time over something. I was sitting by myself at my desk, and it was actually the injury management lady that had been looking after me, just happened to be in our office. And, she said, "Are you okay?" And I lied to her. I said I was, because I just didn't want anything else coming at me. It was all quite intense and brutal, to be honest. So I left that TCS office shortly after, and that was so hard because I just loved that office. As I've said before in the last two, the people, it was my connection to Brett, his memory. We were suffering the loss together, and we all understood. But it was just, actually was really devastating. So the whole narrative about mental health, which, as I say, was completely wrong, and the thing with that, it somehow got twisted to fit someone's agenda. The classic, she's an emotional, unstable female line, because, well, apparently it's still a thing these days, and it was quite insulting and lazy, and it was a mechanism, a way to dismiss what I was actually saying. And Susie was subject to sort of similar behaviours, and I guess that's the easy way to discredit people when when you start that. And it happens so much, not only in policing, but you hear of these sorts of dreadful stories all the time. At one stage, Susie was even told by a really high-ranking officer just to stick to the brief, which then we took as, you need to just go with what the organisation is telling you to go with. And that's exactly the vibe that we were getting of everything that was happening. So I left the TCS office and I went to work in district office, and then a few days back in GDs in Foxtrot crew. And I can honestly say that change of scenery made the world a difference, because I went into the GDs under an officer in charge who's still the same officer in charge there today. And that means what I would call a true leader, fair, compassionate, ethical, the kind of boss that listens before they just speak, the kind who backs his people. So that made a big difference. So leadership is such an important thing, and people bang on about it. In the media and the study that I do, and the value of leadership, and that's just so true, because you can really cruel someone. We all know examples of poor leadership that destroys officers, or the type of leaders that make the difference. And it was actually this same leader that was Susie's family liaison officer, and I'm always grateful for that, because if it wasn't for that type of leadership that she needed at that time, to advocate for her, to look out for her, I think her time would have been made even tougher from that. So that's just a point as well, like the value of family liaison officers. I never had one, and I think that I should have had one, because it's someone you need someone that's been a copper for a while, knows how the system works, and it's a brutal system, let's all face it. It can be brutal. That is prepared to not maybe care so much about getting a promotion, that they're prepared to advocate for someone and their views, whereas I didn't have one, and I was just kind of left sitting in meetings, having someone tell me this is what's happened, and whilst I'm in tears, sitting there by myself. So a strong family liaison officer in these situations is just paramount. It's wrong not to have one for every key person involved, really. But so April 2021, that was that's when the coronial trial started. And as I said, my evidence spoke of about our culture, siloing information, and other operational issues. And as I said, I spoke about questionable policing habits, and it wasn't to air dirty laundry, but it was to tell the truth, because culture is so important in policing. It shapes how decisions are made, how information is shared, and it ultimately keeps everyone safe, because a poor culture, well, it hides the mistakes. And let's face it, in policing there's often egos involved. And sometimes quite frankly, it's like a dick measuring competition, isn't it? Who's got this information, who can get this best crook, and that's kind of it's dangerous, because we all need accountability, because that's what keeps us safe. So I gave my evidence. Susie gave evidence, and that's for her to talk about in the form of affidavits. And I guess because it wasn't well received, the upshot of all of this, and was reflected then through legal submissions and criticisms made towards Susie and I, and some of it was just baseless and just ridiculous, stupid things to say, but it was their way of getting stuck into us. And to me, it just proved the exact culture that I had spoken about in my evidence. I remember in the interview you did with Zach, and he spoke about the coronial process for him, and it was like these other different little pockets they got together and had a go at him, and I mean to a lesser degree with us, but I understood what he said when that was the case. So just to prove that, as I said, Brett and I were aware about this pirate gun. So we were aware he was dangerous, and we were aware he had a pirate gun. But an example of this, there was a stupid submission from Council Assist that was saying, even though he didn't know about automatic weapons or, the report of automatic gunfire, we did know he was high risk, and that in itself was enough to accurately assess the risk, which is just ridiculous. But a pirate gun versus all the other intel that was known, and to say that was enough to accurately assess the risk was to suggest that was just offensive. It was unbelievable, actually. A pirate gun versus an automatic weapon, it just doesn't make sense. There were submissions saying that I failed in my duties to properly inform the pursuit controller to terminate the pursuit when we thought Madison was leading us somewhere. And I was honest in my evidence. When we went left down Waller's Road, we did think that. Both of us thought that was the last words Bretty and I ever said. And I wish to this day that one of us had said, or that I had told, had aired that over comms, but I didn't, and I was honest with that. And of course, though, if we knew the rest of the information, the whole story, we wouldn't have. And two, I guess, as you boys know, when you're in a pursuit, you're also relying on other supports to give you information. I just wish one of these other more senior officers who were sort of so eager to get us out there after Madison could have put two and two together and come up with something helpful. Because we didn't know where we were going. Ends up it was a dirt road where this Waller's Road. We weren't informed of anything. But yet this is the criticisms that they sort of wanted to put on Brett and I. When their backs are against the wall, that's fine. There was even one submission saying that Brett, Susie and I had generated a relationship with the aggrieved, the victim of Ricky Madison's offences, and that we were getting information from her. It was just sort of things that were nonsensical, didn't make sense. I did meet the lady, but it was years after the incident. So all of this is just examples of when they want to come at you, they just sort of say anything. And
yeah.
And what pisses me off, they're allowed to, and nothing is ever pulled up, and that's why. And bullying tactics. One of them even approached my elderly dad, Ross Eibel, and Stu Forte, Bretty's father, during the inquest, to tell them that complaints were being made about Susie and I for withholding information. A complete breach of our privacy. And two, why are you coming near our families and doing this?
Yeah.
So it did end up that a 466 was put in. We sort of didn't know that. That was for misconduct and perjury, of all things, which this was kind of only fully revealed to us during the Commission of Inquiry, the 2022 Commission of Inquiry into domestic and family violence responses from QPS. So that inquiry kind of ran parallel, I guess, in timing to before our findings were released. So our findings were released in March of 2023. And it spoke of a number of missed opportunities to arrest Ricky earlier. But, that's policing. We've all done things, we all could have done things better. That in itself, no one can, you can't be cross at anyone for those types of things. But it did also speak of significant failures of leadership, and it particularly did identify some senior officers in Toowoomba in the fact that who knew that CERT had previously been tasked to arrest Madison. And the findings, it did criticise a lack of leadership to formulate and communicate an effective plan in line with the risks that Madison posed. So in other words, the police running the show, the ones that did know, whether they'd put it together or not, did know this collective of other information and just how dangerous Madison was. So, and the question that we had was, rather than just sending all of us, us TCS and General Duties police out to find Ricky at a phone box and then just pursue him, the coroner was sort of saying some sort of leadership to communicate a safer plan or some sort of options around that. And since that time, DDOs have come into play, duty officers that senior sergeants that have an overarching view of different jobs going on. So I guess that's one thing we would have had that we didn't have then that we do have now. And I was glad that the coroner did recognise this, because we were sort of saying, well, why were we sent out to someone that has been deemed so violent, but then we're not giving any leadership around. Yes, we've got our own wits, and Bretty and I did everything right, but it was definitely lacking that day. And I'm glad the coroner recognised this, because the brief from ESC certainly didn't recognise anything. I guess they were protecting individuals, protecting the QPS. And as I said, everyone makes mistakes, especially in policing, and that's how we learn to be better. And I can live with that. But what I can't live with is the careerist self-preservation, that I found some people seem more focused on protecting their own image, and then came at Susie and I for daring to challenge them. I recall, even in evidence, one of them saying that I was a liar, and suggesting Susie was a liar. Well, not suggesting, saying. And I still to this day do not know what they say I lied about. What I'm getting at telling you this is that's the retaliation you get, when you don't agree with the narrative. So, as I said, it ran parallel with the findings from the 2022 Commission of Inquiry into QPS, into domestic and family violence responses, and that was an ugly read for the QPS, because it outlined a fear of reprisal within the QPS and speaking out against the status quo. And that's a big concern, because the moment that people stop asking questions of the status quo out of fear, then someone else gets control of the narrative, and that is really, really dangerous. So I guess, experience this is why I'm doing my master's in anti-corruption studies, because it really is a significant issue. We live in this amazing country of Australia, this democratic nation, but, we're still back 20 odd years ago when you need to, little lady, you shut your mouth. No, it doesn't sit well with me, I'm afraid. So I guess in a nutshell, that's it.
Yeah.
No,
sorry, I took over there, didn't I?
No, that's what we wanted. That's
yep,
really good.
that's
So,
exactly what we wanted.
Kath, I'm going to detective you a little bit. I've gone back through what you're saying because I need some topic boxes to cover off on.
Yeah, right.
Obviously, we've spoken about that immediate stuff and all the rest of it, but now we're talking about, all right, some questions are going to get asked now. Now comes what happened? How did this happen?
Yeah.
We've dealt with the immediate aftermath. We've dealt with that. What happened? Okay, so obviously ESC, and just for everyone listening, Ethical Standards Command in Queensland, it's the Ethical and Professional Standards Command. Every single jurisdiction's got something similar. Basically, it's within the police force, and they are responsible for upholding ethical standards within the police force. They all have powers to actually question police, and the powers to question police actually say you must answer. So as a result, if you don't answer the question, you commit breaches of discipline that may end up hurting you professionally, basically. So, of course, they are going to come and investigate an incident where a police officer has lost their life, a member of the public has then lost their life as a result of police involvement. Justified, but that doesn't matter. It was still what exactly happened here, and that way, it's the whole idea of this, and the whole reason it was all developed is transparency, so that the public can go, the police did this, the reason they did this is this, and we can fix stuff. But we're all bloody human. And the trouble is, when people have got to a very high rank within the police force, there's a lot to lose. And the thing is, I know when you talk about the culture of that, that high-ranking leadership protecting themselves and really protecting their career, I've seen it firsthand. You've obviously seen it way more firsthand than we have, but it seems universal as well that you get to the top. I would even say it is a systemic problem here as well, where police officers they may not be the ones we necessarily want right at the very, very top. One little slip up, and you're known for this little slip up, and all of a sudden you've got a ceiling above you. So I think what happens to them is there is a fear of showing true leadership and coming out and going, there were major problems made at higher rank. We did not look through. The information should have been going thick and fast. What I'm hearing there, and just from my own operational experience, is there's almost an element of red mist even at the higher rank. Like at the higher rank, and I'm certainly not saying there's red mist across the board, because red mist at the lower rank means you do stupid, reckless things, which go and watch YouTube, anybody listening. It is not stupid and reckless. That is a stock standard police pursuit. You would never have called that pursuit off. He didn't break the road rules. He wasn't endangering anybody. The information was you have a highly wanted person, and we've got him. We've got lots of resources coming. We're not going to relinquish this until he starts demonstrating to us that he's an immediate risk to other road users, to police, to himself. We're going to continue engaging. That's stock standard. That's, you want the police to catch the bad guys. You don't want the police to go, oh, no, not now. We've got him. We need to get him. It's a risky job. This is what we're doing.
That's right.
What should have been happening, and what my role often was, and it was hard because you want to be out there with the guys, but it's not. Your job's to settle back and to be looking at all this and seeking more information and getting those other resources surrounded by this. Like a few things you said that triggered me off, and thinking like, well, that's something that I would have seen and gone, whoa, like get these guys coming. It would have been that, and I think they were. Was CERT rolling already?
Yeah. So both on the transmission, yes, I called for Polair, and they were on their way. They weren't really that far off, to be honest. Same with CERT, they were gunning to get there. Yes, and they all weren't that far off. That's right.
Yeah. So this is certainly not a criticism of operational response, because at that level,
no.
at our level, because I thought it was completely what we would all do. It's
that's right.
1,000 times we've all done this. Well, I've done this. I mean, Schultzy's done it. To me, it should have been almost at that high level. It's like, righto, let's put the intel together. Let's really go through this. It might have been, we've got alerts here on this guy. We're going to a remote location. We've got reports of this. Bang, bang. It would have been, right, let's get a big wide cordon. We've got CERT coming. We can apply search procedures within that cordon. Let's end that now. And it would have been that leadership to go, let's get a containment. Let's get some cordons happening. Get a containment at the bottom of Waller's Road. You mentioned the top. There was a road. There was some kind of track at the top. Let's get a big cordon.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there's somebody already there. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. We are Monday morning, as Northern Territory police officers, or former, we are Monday morning quarterbacking this, but that's just...
Yeah, that's right. And hindsight's a good thing. That's exactly right.
It's learning from that higher rank. So the other thing, which is surprising in some respects and then not in others, is that there is risk aversity in so many elements of society that basically hold us back. We are too risk averse in so many things, yet a lot of policing, we're risk averse in certain aspects, and then we're very, very reckless in others. And I'm talking at higher ranking, where it's, right, there he is, go get him. It's like, no, there he is, right. Let's have what we're trained to do when you're dealing with big incidents, critical incidents. Let's have a planned response. We've now got contact with this person. Let's get safe contact and put in a planned response given the level of risk that we're dealing with. And that, that's something that goes hand in hand. A couple of other things that you covered off, the culture of bad leadership. That's all right. We've got some American background music. That's all right.
That's right.
I think someone started vacuuming. Stopped.
No, it's all good. So obviously that's more talking about that higher ranking and that duty officer. What we would call the watch commander up there was doing, poring over what do we got here, and then putting in that planned response, getting resources. It sounds like obviously there was some of that happening. That resources were coming, but
and this was a bit unusual too. One of the sergeants from TCS was sent over to the comms room, and that was brought up in the coronial because that's unusual to have other personnel in the comms room for that same purpose, because this person knew a bit of information. So what you're saying is right. So to get the intel, but it kind of didn't make any difference, I guess.
No,
Anyway, yeah, you're
no.
right.
And just
Um,
a couple of more little points, and then Schultzy, I'll flick over to you in a sec. I was
yeah,
just going to say another thing you said, the coronial process that we learn all about this thing. We don't have culture of bullying. We don't have, we should have safe workplaces. We should have situations where people feel empowered to be able to speak their mind and all the rest of it. Well, in a coronial, the lawyers for other people can basically say whatever they like and can absolutely destroy you, and it seems to be no accountability for that conduct.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I was so surprised at some of these ridiculous, nonsensical, quite frankly, just I don't know where they were made up.
Mm.
Um, and why are they allowed to do this? And
Mm.
and it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And again, yeah. Continue.
Yeah, so my
Damo,
point there
I
is,
agree.
can you imagine if we badgered a witness or harangued a victim to the point where they were in tears or just completely and utterly broken and wanted to disengage from the process, we'd be held. We would have hell to pay. There would, and rightly so, because that's not the role. That's not what police are for. Then why is it that the judiciary can do that? It's sort of good for the goose, good for the gander. If
Yeah,
society is supposed to behave like this, well, that very, very prestigious place inside a courtroom should be held to the highest regard. But a lot of the time it isn't, and I can tell you that from a lot of experience, and you've obviously experienced it as well. And it's just it can be extremely brutal, and they can throw accusations at you, and you have no immediate recourse. It's just, in my mind, there are a lot of things about the law that are certainly not fair.
mm,
And it just is a big game in the end. I call it the legal industry for a reason.
yeah, that's right. Couldn't agree more.
Sorry, my last final point that I wrote down too, and just from what you've said so far, was that there is also, and I've spoken about this previously a lot, was the Zach Rolfe matter. There appears to be a fear within very senior executive police officers to have the ability to come out and explain things the way that we do in this podcast. I mean, like we say, there is nothing special about us. Why is it that we can say things in a podcast that makes everyone go, "Oh yeah," whereas a senior executive police officer who's set, they determine the direction of the police force. Why can't they come out and go, "Our members are acting in good faith in order to bring about an offender with this evidence that's all before the court, and you can read all about it." I completely support their actions. We are not perfect. Things go wrong. Hindsight is a beautiful thing. None of you were there. You're criticizing us now, but none of you were there. None of you were Johnny on the spot making these decisions at the time, and the outcome has already been catastrophic. Why do you think these guys would repeat the procedure if they had all the information now? That of course not. But they did the best they could, and I'm talking at operational level now. They did the absolute best they could with the information and the resources they had at the time. And guess what? Policing's dangerous at times. Most of the time, policing's
yeah,
dangerous.
Yeah, that's right.
So
yeah,
I really wish more senior executive police would come out and say this stuff, verbalize it, get your face on the media and look down the barrel of the camera and tell people what police do. But they don't. They used to, but they don't anymore. And I don't, I think it's that, once again, it's that fear of being seen to not go with the narrative of politicians. I don't know, but
Yeah,
that's my rant. Anyway, I just sort of wanted to cover just rehash a couple of things that you've sort of covered there, and just sort of support it with what we've seen as well. Schultzy,
yeah.
what do
yeah. Look, yeah. I mean, how long you got?
Mm,
What it actually, yeah, what there was. Funnily enough, there was a comment made at Brett Forte's funeral by another officer who I was talking to, and they said, because I was mentioning about the funeral, it was well done, it was orchestrated, it was it was beautiful with
it was a beautiful funeral.
yeah. And he turned to me and he said, "Please do this really well." However, afterwards they do it terribly,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it just makes so much
Yep.
sense from what you're talking about. The hierarchy plays in rank, and they did it in Zach's, they did it in yours. Just cop it. Yes, we fucked up.
Mm.
Like, and one of the things you mentioned was, oh, you should have called it off because you had this information. Hold on, any police officer listening to that pursuit can call it off if that's the same in Queensland because it is in the
Yeah.
northern.
Yeah,
So
that's right. But
if you
yeah.
had that information, speak up for crying out loud. This is an organisation. We're a team. It's not just Kathy and Brett in the car. It's thousands of other people
Yeah,
of
that's right.
listening to this, and they have the right to actually get on there
D-
if they've got information and call it off.
Yeah,
So,
and you're right, Schultzy. And I guess too that's kind of why I felt so let down. After the coronial, in that certain people were so eager to put it all back on Brett and I with these sort of comments, and they should have stopped, they should have done this. Well, hang on, what about you taking some responsibility
yep,
rather than you know making up a narrative to try and a ridiculous narrative to try and get yourself out of certain situations? Why
yep,
don't you just man up and say, hey, listen, I wish we did X, Y, and Z. Like every day I say, I wish I called that, I stopped at Wallace Road. I wish I'd said on the radio, we're getting a feeling here, what's going on. And someone might have twigged one of these people to say, hey, listen, Wallace Road, automatic weapons, we've got intel reports, stop, stop, stop. Every day.
yep,
And I'm sure
Yeah.
Susie wishes that it happened every day,
Yeah.
and,
yep,
and the Forte family. But yeah, it's just, and to me, it's well, I call it careerist self-preservation, I guess. And then it also takes courage for another leader to stand up and say, "Hey, listen, no, we'll advocate for the little people," rather
yep,
than having your groupthink mentality about what should happen, and
Mm.
then that narrative is, "Oh, well, Nielsen's a lunatic and Fort's a vindictive bitch." So don't start that because that's not right.
Mm.
Instead, why don't you have a look at yourselves and
yep,
what how maybe you contributed and
Mm.
own that, and you mightn't be as mean and nasty.
yeah.
I think another
That's
thing we really, really
sorry,
have
Damo.
to break it
Yep,
right down to is that there's one person who completely is at fault here, and that's Ricky Madison.
Exactly, and
yep,
that's exactly
Right.
right.
Mm.
That's
yep,
and yeah, Damo, we should have said that at the start. That's right.
Mm.
No one else pulled the trigger but
No.
him. No one else, drove there but him. He
yep,
did all of that.
Mm.
Um, and there will always be other Ricky Madisons in this world. We've already seen it. Since this a number of times, unfortunately. And we just have to, I would love that it would be, I'd love if it never happened again, of course, but everyone just needs to be transparent, take whatever criticisms may come at them, because we all make mistakes.
Mm.
We need
yeah,
to be on the same team, and the Ricky Madisons are on the other team,
That's right.
So it needs to,
yep.
Or in prison the
change.
first time.
So, yeah.
Mm.
Um, and the other thing, actually, you mentioned it there as well, is it's leadership and failure of leadership. I've seen it so many times. One of the ones I read about was a coronial inquest in relation to, I can't remember specific details, but it was a guy that was carrying on in Sydney and he got tasered a number of times, and ended up dying, basically,
Mm.
and so there was a big inquest, and it was that we were made to read the whole report because it looked bad on the police. Well, yes, it did look bad on the police, but it looked bad on leadership.
Mm.
They could have actually justified every single action they took. I was reading it going, if the
Yeah,
sergeant actually came out and said this, the coroner would have gone, oh, okay, that's why
Mm.
you did that. But he didn't. He just tried to throw somebody else under the
yeah,
bus.
Mm.
yeah,
But crying out loud, take ownership and take responsibility. You it,
mm,
and you can justify this stuff. Stop trying to protect yourself,
Mm.
um,
mm,
and because you're thinking to make yourself. No, it makes you actually look worse.
yeah,
And this is also a story to the hierarchy. You look like idiots when you do this sort of stuff. Honestly, the rest of the public and police officers sit there and look at you and go, and politicians are crying out loud. Just sit
Yeah,
there and go, you know what? We messed up, but we're fixing it.
yeah, that's
I
right.
guarantee you, win more votes if you do it that way. Um,
And yeah,
yeah, it's just and the other one is standing up for others. Zach mentioned it a couple of times. People that actually had the guts to stand up and on your side to talk meant so much because they're actually like they're putting their head above the trenches, to be shot at because they believe
yeah,
that this information is correct and it needs to come out. And I've got a lot of uh, what would we say? I think it's admirable that
mm,
people do that. It's really,
mm,
really. Um, the other thing the last point that I made was the importance of information. So this is police work is surrounded by information taking and putting that into the system so people have the information available to them at the time. One of the things I know in Promise, people wouldn't actually record, say, mobile phone numbers in Promise. Promise was an awesome tool. If you want to look up a mobile phone number, you could see who it was linked to, like all the
mm,
way through, but people weren't putting that information. That's just a simple example. If you don't put the information into the system, it won't come out the other end.
Mm.
So when you're a police officer, spend that extra half an hour making sure that every bit of information that you've seen or received goes
mm,
into the system and people are notified because that will help prevent. And this goes back to the hierarchy again. It's your responsibility to make sure that the troops are doing that.
Mm.
And
mm,
that's how this sort of stuff might be prevented.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
The responsibility falls on the hierarchy.
Mm.
And what you said before there, Schultzy, what you're talking about is moral courage, really. Moral bravery,
Yeah.
and it's people don't want to be criticised, especially in an open forum, open media. Of course not.
Yeah.
But you know what? Show some, be a bit brave. And then the other point you made was of the people that do advocate for you when it's in certain circles, it's in the circles of certain bosses, it's not popular to do that. But the ones that do advocate for you, they they're brave. They're brave too for doing that for you. And Susie and I do still have so much support from the groundswell in Toowoomba, and because people know, it's kind of embedded in our history, in our policing history now, really, to be honest, in Toowoomba.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're really two really good points. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Schultzy, last point.
No, mate. No, you go. I've lost my train of
No,
thought.
so what I was saying, so obviously we just reflected on what you've said leading into that. So just talking about obviously the protective culture, what went on, the coronial, how that was, all the rest of it. Do you want to go through the findings and just what happened post the findings and how that was implemented, or what if any of the recommendations were implemented and the outcome?
There was he made a handful of recommendations. One to do with shots fired jobs. So now there's change of procedures on those types of jobs. Another one's being the DDOs, which that has been implemented. There was another finding in relation to intel and linking on intel and intel reports. So it was actually recently we've done it's about a half hour session on that. I guess really it's just going over things that we all should do properly and should link properly and know what happens. There was a couple of others. So one thing that came out was when the incident happened, we didn't have a first aid kit to use on Brett. Because, as I said, it was locked in the top car we were in. It was locked in the little panel on the side. So there was no way we could get to it. So we didn't have anything. So now each officer has their own little pack, you would call it, first aid pack, that's got a number of things in it. So if we had that on the day, it wouldn't have saved Brett's life. But you could have at least, I don't know. Yeah. So that's all good things. That's all good stuff. Yeah. Yep.
Just a couple of things there. DDO is District Duty Officer, so basically a senior.
Yes, sorry, I should have said the full
person.
word.
that's all right. We just get non-coppers who go, so
Yeah, that's right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So district duty officer called many different things in many different jurisdictions, but basically an overarching person who is of a
Mm.
rank where they're not going to be your bestie, but they're certainly above and just sitting there operationally,
Yeah.
and having that ability to make the calls that mightn't necessarily be popular at the time, but unnecessary. And one point you made there was just the intel stuff, and you triggered a little memory where intelligence wasn't always available to everybody. And look, I understand this. Coming from the drug world, I certainly understand that. My little time in, we had obviously more access to intel around what we needed. And we'd often, if there was information leaked out to the wider police force, unfortunately, humans are humans, and there's not always in police stations, people can hear things, and it might even be said that people say things out loud, and someone in the front counter hears something and reports things back. So the old saying, "Loose lips sink ships," that's true, but people have to have information to do their job. So to me, it's intelligence access
Mm.
is a big one. The number of times we've had people go, "Oh, tell me any dealings with this." "Oh, well, yeah, no worries. What do you want to know?" "Oh, I can't tell you that." It's like, "Oh, well, go away then." Like, what if you're not going to share your info? Then
Yeah, that's right.
they're not
Yeah,
trusted
that's
enough
right.
to share it.
That's right. Some things do have to be kept. That's right. That's exactly what you're saying. But then when
Mm,
you're in this situation, well, then all of a sudden we're all trying to locate or find the person.
mm.
Well, why didn't we know everything that other people knew? Was
Yeah,
and like that was a big issue in the coronial, and that is a hard one, isn't it?
yeah, and this is where
Mm.
it's not. Yeah, this is where it is hard because you must keep some information under wraps, and unfortunately, things to do with like officer safety.
It can, yeah,
If we got reports of like automatic weapons, that to me that should be a big alarm bell. Like, righto, all bets are off here.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned talk about my brothers. Well, they've had the little blue candy cars turn up at my brother's place a couple of times because they've heard reports of semi-automatic gunfire, and it wasn't semi-automatic. It's just that they had 3 or 4 shotguns shooting clay targets up on their block. And anyway, I think one, and I certainly won't mention names, but I think one car turned up there one day, and they had all the shotguns laid on the table, pointing down range, and they actually got in there and had a bit of a shot with them. So that was a bit of good community engagement. But
yeah.
shot fired jobs are really hard because, like you say, they're common. People listening to this who aren't police would just go, "Oh my god, shots fired!" as if you'd get everyone around. It's like if you're in a rural area, people have guns. There are gun licenses. Gunshots
Mm.
go boom. You can hear them. They happen around here all the time, and we just go, "Oh, well, someone's found a wild dog, or someone's shooting a fox, or something." It's no big deal, or they're just having a shot. Like
Yeah.
it's not a big deal.
Mm.
Uh, but the thing is, once again, as a police officer approaching this, there's risk. You can't. You don't know if those shots were just someone going, "Oh, gee, sorry, mate, I was just reciting the old bloody thing. I went to shoot a fox and it missed, so I had to sight it in. Like, what do you want me to do?" You know, it's like, "Oh, no problem. Law-abiding citizen with a gun license, not a problem." But then,
Mm.
who do you know? Is it going to be that, or is it the next time you turn up there and you've got a William situation?
Yeah.
Policing is inherently dangerous, and it
Mm.
always will be.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right.
and I think there's a lot of that came into this because that same matter with firearms in vehicles with high risk offenders, that's gone the other way 1,000 times as well, where the person's just eventually been arrested after a siege and nobody's.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
In every jurisdiction, it happens all the time, daily.
And that's right. Most
You know?
times that's how it ends up. That's right.
That's right. That's
And
it.
Thank God.
I
Yeah.
think sorry, I've just got it's a bit of a funny one, really. Out the back of the police station, talking about shots fired. We were sitting out the back one evening, and it was, what do they call it? Territory Day. Or was
Oh,
just after Territory Day. Anyway, we got
fireworks.
this.
Just for,
We,
for
we,
Uh,
non-Territorians,
mm.
fireworks. Lots of them.
Fireworks, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're sitting out the back of the station. My partner and I, we're watching these fireworks going off, and yeah, we know it's illegal, but trying to find them by the time you get there is, we're going, oh yeah, all right. It's only just after Territory Day, so you give it a little bit of leeway, even though it's illegal. But then we get this call over the radio: shots fired behind Acacia Drive. The police station's on Acacia Drive. We're sitting there watching the fireworks. Person says they know what fireworks is. This is not. This is gunfire. I'm going, is it still going? Yep. Yeah, well, so are the fireworks.
Hmm.
So, you're most likely what you're hearing is actually fireworks.
Yeah,
And if we can't hear the gunfire, and we're at the back of the police station because it's behind Acacia Drive, it's obviously fireworks.
fireworks.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah,
So,
No,
and I think that's also the importance of actually investigating this sort of stuff as well when
Mm.
there are shots fired, and probably, I don't know, probing harder.
yeah.
well, yeah. I mean, the automatic gunfire investigation. Something was going on at the time, actually. Yeah, so I think it was Gatton Police were starting to investigate where it was coming from
Yeah.
because they didn't quite know. That's right.
Yeah.
They
No,
knew it was on
I
my
mean,
roads, but they didn't quite know.
this is another point where a lot of people who aren't necessarily operationally people who aren't operational coppers would be going, well, automatic gunfire, that to me would be the most urgent thing going. It's like, do you know what? No, because we've got actual victims with actual evidence, and the thing is, people think, well, you had this job, why didn't they do it properly? Because it was the 15th time they've been to something in the last 3 hours. Like, this is the thing, it's job to job to job to job to
Yeah.
job. They're very, very busy. There's resources.
Yeah,
Not just
and they were doing something to try and find. They
and
were,
that's right.
yeah,
And the thing is,
they
automatic
were.
gunfire that isn't attached to some kind of attack or some kind of other incident could even be just some weird bloke who's experimenting with an illegal firearm that has no intention, but it could also be a bloody terrorist training center and everything in between. So it's once again, it's this is why policing's hard. It's a
That's
hard
Yeah,
job.
And it comes down to resources,
Yeah.
and this is something for politicians and the hierarchy to look at. If they needed more resources to investigate that shooting or the automatic gunfire and all that sort of thing, that is a consequence of
Mm.
of what happened or what led up to it. So resources, if we had all the resources in the world, I mean, if we were CSI, we'd have everything
yeah,
solved.
that's right. There'd be problems will be solved. No,
That's right.
I would love to have had that woman's computer. It knew bloody everything.
yeah,
Yeah.
do everything.
Yeah. So, obviously, Kath, anything else that you think we were going to ask you that hasn't sort of been covered?
I don't. No, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't think so. Not off the top of my head. No, I
No,
don't think so.
that's all right. I do
Oh,
have
yeah.
one. I
Oh,
do have
sorry,
an
you go.
extremely serious question for you.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Very, very serious matter.
Yeah, it is very serious.
So we have we've been building a little tradition with all our guests. We may cover some really heavy stuff with a lot of our guests, but we still have a sense of humor because it's essential to survival. Can you think of an incident during your time as a police officer and current serving where somebody has made a faux pas and you believe that a carton should definitely have been purchased for the crew? A cartonable offence. Have you got anything off the top of your head?
That
Well,
you mentioned.
Yeah.
that I can mention. Well, and funny you say that. A lot of those ridiculously hilarious work incidences did involve one Brett Andrew Forte. Yeah. So as far as look, not off the top of my head, but he was. I mean, he used to fart everywhere. So he was and often, and and this is not long before the incident, he was walking up. There's a set of stairs to get up to where our office was, and he was up however many stairs ahead of me. We got out the car, he's however many stairs ahead of me, and he's done it in the stairwell and raced up the stairs and shut the door. I then come behind him, walking through it. Then there was a heap of people behind me that would have then thought it was me, but it was him, and he thought it. And he used to do that all. Oh my God! Yeah, I'll never forget that. Oh my God!
Well, perfect. Brett Forte, carton from Beyond the Grave.
Yeah,
Rest
that's
in
right.
peace, my friend, but that's a carton.
That is.
Yeah, bless him.
Yeah.
What I really like is that it obviously sounds like, we sort of dedicate this little series to Brett because he sounds like he's a bloke who we would have got along with bloody well. He's got a similar attitude.
Good person. Yeah,
good fella.
Really
bloke.
good person, and he comes from a great family, and of course, Susie. So yeah, he was one of the good ones. He really was.
Yeah.
He's still missed.
And no
He's
doubt.
still dearly missed.
Lost a hero that day.
Yep, we did.
No,
Yeah.
well, Kath, we thank you a hell of a lot. It's obviously none of this can be easy, but we really appreciate you coming on board with us, and I think the listeners do too, because it gives. We talk about the normalisation of the police force. Well, here's just another ordinary person being a
Yeah.
police officer doing a hell of a
Ordinary
job.
person, ordinary day. That's right.
Yep, yep. Just
Yeah,
another
that's right.
day
No,
being.
thank you. Thank you, boys. It's
No,
been a pleasure.
And Kath, I'd like to say, like a lot of what you spoke about, I think it was really important to discuss as well, because we can't move forward unless people take responsibility and actually admit their mistakes and
Mm.
actually fix them in the future. And it's very,
Yeah,
very important, I think, for any police force to do that.
yeah,
Um,
good point, Shiltsy. Good point.
so, yeah, a massive admiration for you.
yeah. Well, Kath,
Thank
go
you.
off and have a bad cup of coffee over there in Buffalo in the United
Yes,
States.
terrible. It's terrible coffee.
Enjoy your day because it's still sparrowfart over there, and it's getting bloody past my bedtime here. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, rightio. Sounds good.
no,
Thanks, boys.
very good,
All
great. Thanks very much.
right.
Catch us
Yeah,
next
stay
week.
on after if you want. We'll just let this catch up. But yeah, mate, Damo, what do you reckon? We finish this off?
Happy days, mate.
All right. To Ordinary Cops signing off.